Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Alberta Wheat Commission and the Alberta Barley Commission Amalgamation Town Hall. My name is Greg Sears. I'm a farmer from Sexsmith, Alberta, and chair of the Alberta Wheat Commission board.
And my name's Tara Sawyer. I farm in the Acme region. I'm chair of the Alberta Barley Commission. Both Greg and I will be chairing today's session with you all, so welcome. Joining us today, we also have our General Manager, Tom Steve, and Chief Operating Officer, Saida Karam, along with Brent McEwen. He's the General Manager of the Alberta Agriculture Products Marketing Council, and they'll be online to answer any of your questions. This session, we're planning to be around 1 hour. We hope that the wheat and barley farmers will learn more about the proposed new commission plan regulation, including changes from existing wheat and barley plan regulations. Most importantly, we are looking for your input. You'll also gain insight into the amalgamation critical path forward, as well as what has been completed to date. Other highlights include the announcement of our nominations for the interim board and an overview of the additional regulatory changes required to complete this process.
A couple of housekeeping items for this town hall. After the past few years, I'm sure most of you have participated in a virtual event before, so none of this should come as a major surprise. Firstly, we have a chat function for you all to talk amongst the group. Feel free to say hello to everyone and tell us where you're from. Just make sure that everyone can see your comments by selecting everyone in the to section of the chat. Next, if you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A box. Also, if you haven't asked a question, but see one that is something you would like to answered, please upvote that question for us to answer them first. The formal Q&A session of today will be at the end of the agenda, and we will have the capacity and capability of allowing people to ask questions live using the raise your hand button. Also, all of you should have received the draft plan regulations in the email address you used for registration. If you don't have that email, please connect with Megan Evans, the host of today's meeting. Finally, if anyone is having technical issues or needs help locating any of those buttons, please again connect with Megan.
Moving on to the agenda, you can see on the screen our agenda for today, starting with the review of the critical path, then the regulations and bylaws overview, which will look at the different regulations and what is covered under each. After that, we will focus on the summary of changes for the new plan regulation. This section will highlight major changes from one or both commission's original plan regulations and give insight into how the new commission will be governed. Once the meat of today's session is complete, we will update you all on who has been nominated as the interim board of directors for the new commission and how long their term is. And finally, we will end with a question and answer period, as mentioned by Greg, to answer any of your questions, your concerns. That's what we're here for, that we want to hear from you.
First, I'd like to refresh everyone on the path that the commissions have traveled so far to get to where we are today. Back in the fall of 2017, both commission boards decided to launch a pilot project to explore the idea of a single management team to run the operations of both commissions. The boards quickly realized the additional synergies and fiscal efficiencies of moving to a collaborative management structure, which freed up more resources to fund such projects as our robust agronomy extension program, heightened kids' education efforts, and enhanced communication initiatives that we see today. We also leveraged the strength of our finance, admin, and communications teams to launch Farm Cash, the advanced program under the advanced payment program in 2018. Since the initial resolution back in the fall of 2018 of both commissions investigating a formal merger, there has been a ton of work behind the scenes. Some of this included the striking of a subcommittee comprised of both wheat and barley directors, delegates, and regional reps, completing formal consultation with two town halls and an online survey, and most recently, the passing of 2 plebiscites this past October by margins of 88% and 89%. Those are just some of the quick highlights. The vision behind both commissions coming together is to create better value for Alberta wheat and barley farmers and further capturing efficiencies both fiscally and operationally. As you can see on this slide, the commissions have realized net savings of over $350,000 annually, which has allowed us to invest in further offerings for farmers, such as I have previously mentioned. Research is our largest single budget item, and our interim board will be adopting a merit-based funding philosophy going forward. This will ensure that Alberta wheat and barley farmers get the best return on investment with their levy dollars. And finally, we see the new commission becoming a stronger voice within our sector by having 2 cereal crops in a major growing region working under one banner. We see the impact we have on our national organizations such as Cereal Canada, Grain Growers of Canada, Canadian Malt Barley Technical Centre, the Brewing and Malting Barley Research Institute, and the Canada Grains Council, to name a few. And we intend to continue being leaders within these organizations.
Well, that's a rookie mistake. Apologies. Now moving on to our critical path. This slide illustrates that what we have completed to date and what else needs to be tackled by our management team and our interim board of directors. I'll start with what has been completed to date on this critical path. In December of 2022, the formation of a joint board committee was struck to take over the work of the Amalgamation Subcommittee after the 2 plebiscites provided a mandate to move the commissions into one entity. In January of 2023, we selected 12 nominees to the interim board that will carry out the final steps in the amalgamation process. Just to note, all directors from both boards were asked to complete an expression of interest in sitting on the interim board, and then each board finalized their nominees, and where necessary, elections were held. Also at our joint board meeting in January, we chose the new commission's name. At this time, we are not releasing that information, but we will be making a formal announcement in early May as we move through the final stages of the amalgamation process, so look for that. This past month, our management team, led by Tom Steve and Saida Karam, has been busy working on the repeal of existing regulations and the drafting of the new plan regulation, which is what we're discussing today. Both of these items, the repeal and the approval of the new plan regulation, have been approved by Marketing Council's Board of Directors. I want to take a moment now to thank Marketing Council, particularly and especially Brent McEwen and Ruben Juicy, for all their help and collaboration in bringing this to life. They have been fantastic. Now, moving on to items in our critical path that we are currently in progress or are incomplete. This month, the management team is working on the Canada Revenue Agency application for the new commission. During the month of May, the commissions will notify all existing grain dealers about the changes on how to remit checkoffs to the new commission and apply for new licenses. In June, we expect the minister to approve the new regulations for the commission in preparation for our August 1st, 2023 operation start date of the new commission, with the interim board taking office at that time.
Thanks, Tara, for that update on the critical path. I'm sure some of you saw it at our AGMs in December and January, but it's always nice to see the progression on a project like this. Now, delving into what the bulk of today's session is about, the plan regulation. We wanted to give producers a crash course on what it is, why it's needed, and who are the key organizations involved in managing and issuing plan regulations. For starters, you may have heard us mention Marketing Council. Marketing Council was created to supervise commissions and marketing boards' governance and operation to ensure they adhere to the Marketing of Agricultural Products Act, also known as MAPA. For marketing boards and commissions to run under MAPA, with the supervision of Marketing Council, there are 3 different sets of regulations or frameworks that are created to govern commissions: a plan regulation, a commission regulation, and bylaws. Today, we are primarily reviewing the proposed plan regulation to garner feedback from our membership. I will now pass the session along to Tom Steve and Saida Karam to discuss the different components of each of these regulations. Tom?
Thank you, Greg and Tara, for those updates. As Greg mentioned, there are 3 components required for a commission to function under MAPA, and you see them on the screen. The first being the plan regulation, then the commission regulation, followed by bylaws. Bylaws are new to us at Alberta Barley and the Alberta Wheat Commission, and actually all commissions in Alberta. So you will see things removed out of the plan regulation that will now be placed under bylaws. For starters, in today's town hall, you will see that the plan regulation covers the following scope: the fundamental provisions establishing the commission, the agriculture product, or in our case, products that the plan applies to, the purpose of the commission, what service do we provide, how the plan will be financed, and the refundability of the service charge, makeup of the board, including how and when they are elected and who can vote, and finally, the method for reviewing an election. So really, the plan regulation is the foundation document for any commission. If we compare that scope to the commission regulation, which defines the following: amount of checkoff or service charge, method for changing the service charge, how we collect the service charge, details around how producers request refunds, and requirements around dealer licensing. We can see that the plan regulation, again, is the high-level framework in which the commission exists. So moving on to bylaws. These do not need to be approved by the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation. As part of the provincial government's red tape reduction strategy, these items can now be altered with the approval of both the Commission and Marketing Council's Board of Directors. So a much more streamlined process. Bylaws cover the following: governance of the Commission and the management, eligibility for membership and general rights of producers, terms of office, appointment of or election of chair and vice chair, appointment of the auditor, meeting procedures for AGMs and regional meetings, and details around elections and voting. Now I will pass it along to Saida Karam, our Chief Operating Officer for the commissions, to talk about the process for approval of the plan regulation.
Thanks, Tom, for that introduction. As mentioned, I will be walking the group through the process from development to implementation and sign-off. Firstly, the Amalgamation Committee, which is now comprised of the nominated interim board of directors, Marketing Council, Board of Directors, Marketing Council, and the Commission's management team have been working diligently together to develop the plan regulations we're consulting on with you today, and were emailed out to you prior to today's session. After the Amalgamation Committee approved the draft plan regulation, it was brought forward at our joint board meeting in January 2023 for both boards to approve. Both the Alberta Wheat Commission and Alberta Barley boards passed formal motions during the board meetings to accept the draft plan regulations as presented. Due to the aggressive timelines the commissions are pursuing, we have submitted the proposed plan regulations to Marketing Council's Board of Directors. The plan regulations are approved in principle, subject to the consultation process today. Once the proposed plan is approved by Marketing Council's board, it will go through editing and drafting within the Department of Justice. Once those are vetted, the plan regulations will be submitted to the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation for approval. Then, with the Minister's approval, the Commission will now have a formal approved plan regulation to operate from.
Moving on to the actual review of the proposed plan regulation. Again, you should have received the proposed plan regulation in your email that you used to register yesterday. If you haven't received the document, please connect with Megan Evans and she will email it out to you. And a forewarning, it's a highly technical document full of legalese, but it is what it is. So moving into the actual review of the proposed plan regulation, we will be walking through sections of the plan where there are differences between Alberta Wheat Commission and Alberta Barley's plan regulation and the new regulation. Not every section will be covered, since those items were replicated in each commission's original plan regulation and will be carried over into the proposed plan regulation for the new commission. So let's start with section 1, definitions. Many of them overlap from Alberta Barley and AWC, with the exception of subsections C and D from the AWC plan regulation, which will be moved to the new commission's bylaws. Subsections C1, C2, 1.1, and N from the Alberta Barley's plan regulation will be moved to the new commission's bylaws. The new definition of annual commission meeting clarifies all eligible producers will be able to vote, similar to what the format is for the Alberta Wheat Commission. Previously, Alberta Barley at the AGM, directors and delegates are eligible to vote. Use of AWC's definition of dealer will be used in the new plan, and use of Alberta Barley's delegate term will be used for regional representation for the commission. You will also note the definitions of wheat and barley have remained unchanged from the existing regulations to the new one. Looking at section 2, designation of agricultural product. This change is pretty much straightforward, since the new commission will be responsible for both barley and wheat. Both crops are designated as the agriculture products under this regulation. When reviewing section 6, purpose of the plan, we will be using Alberta Barley's description under its plan regulation, since it is more robust and comprehensive. Wording has been altered to include both crops for the new plan regulation. Skipping ahead to section 8, functions of the commission. This has been simplified, and much of the provisions from AWC and Alberta Barley's section on this have been removed and will be present in the bylaws instead. For section 9, operation of plan re-regulations, the new proposed plan will include subsection H that appears in wheat but not in barley, which highlights the regulation making authorities. Pivoting to section 10, financing of the plan, the only change is regarding implementing AWC's approach to having all eligible producers vote at the AGMs and special meetings, which I just mentioned previously. Saida?
Now, if we look at section 11, service charges refundable, there are a few significant changes since both AWC and Alberta Barley had different approaches to refund requests. The detail that are currently in the AWC plan regulation will be moved to the commission regulation. The time period for service charge refund requests currently being used by AWC have been inserted into the proposed plan, as it works better from an administrative point of view. And finally, subsection 2 has been altered to allow marketing council the choice on whether a plebiscite is needed if the service charge refund exceeds a given threshold, in this case 35%. For section 12, which is on the collection of the service charge, again, the new commission will be implementing the timeline used for submission of service charge from dealers of 30 days. You will note many of the detailed provisions that set out the types of information required to be reported to the commission when collecting service charge will be moved to the commission's regulations. Jumping ahead to section 14, regions. The new commission will be basing the regions off of Alberta Barley's 6 regions. Each region's counties will be defined in the bylaws. For the board of directors section, the new commission's board will consist of 12 eligible producers, 2 elected directors from each region. There will not be any directors at large in the new commission. For section 16 on elections of board of directors, there are 2 major changes. The first being the wording in subsection 1, around or in conjunction with, to allow flexibility for electronic voting to be conducted. For subsection 2, there is some clarification that a producer only needs to produce one of the crops in the region in order to be eligible to vote in that region. And finally, section 17, filling vacancies by appointment. The proposed plan simplifies the process for appointing a director to fill a vacancy, and the details around the term of the office have been moved to the new commission's bylaws. And with that, those are the summary of changes to the new proposed plan regulation. I'll now pass it along to Tara and Greg to tackle the remaining agenda items starting with the announcement of the nominated interim board.
Thanks, Saida. So as it was mentioned in the overview of the changes of the plan regulation, the new board of directors will be comprised of 12 directors. They will be eligible producers with 2 directors elected from each of the 6 regions. There will also be 4 delegate positions from each region for the new commission's delegate body. The new commission's 6 regions will be based off the boundaries that Alberta Barley presently uses. However, the counties have not been finalized, and that will be defined in the new commission bylaws.
And now for the big reveal. Here is our nominated interim board for the new commission, which is now being accepted by Marketing Council. We have from Alberta Barley and the region they presently represent, Sean Stanford, Region 1, Tara Sawyer, Director at Large, Roy Newman, Region 2, Connie Matson, Director at Large, Clint Jakula, Region 4, and Scott Jesperson, Region 5.
And from the Alberta Wheat Commission and the regions they presently represent, we have Dave Bishop, Director at Large, Dean Hubbard from Region 2, no, he's Region 1, Devin Hartzler, Region 2, Jason Lenz, Region 3, Sean Jakula, Region 4, and Greg Sears, Region 5.
Thanks, Tara. The interim board of directors will be in office from August 1st, 2023 until the new commission's AGM, which is yet to be defined. The permanent board will be elected in October and November of this year. And the initial permanent board will have varying term lengths of 1, 2, or 3 years. This will address transfer of knowledge when newer directors join the board. Details around which positions will get longer terms is yet to be determined. After each initial election, each director on the permanent board will have up to 2 terms of 3 years each.
And with that, that concludes our update on the new plan regulation and other aspects of amalgamation. We've just gone over a fair bit of stuff relatively quickly, so we're going to now open up the floor for questions, comments, or clarifications. Again, you can use the Q&A button or the raise hand feature to ask your question. And with that, pass to Greg.
Okay, have we got some questions here? Megan, are you going to moderate this?
Yes, I am. Sorry, guys. I don't know. Maybe I'll stop share this. Okay, so I do have a question in the Q&A. So this is referring to, has section 17 been included in the bylaws? For clarity, has section 17 been included in the bylaws? So just a reminder on section 17, that is referring to the filling vacancies by appointment. So it looks like that, yes, the proposed plan, well, I'll let you guys answer that. But we did speak about that, whether or not it's moving to the new commission bylaws. So who would like to take that question?
Sure, I'll take it on. We're in the very early stages of developing the bylaws, and essentially it's a bit of a cut and paste exercise, which we've started working with Marketing Council on it, taking items that are currently in the plan regulation of the 2 commissions and migrating them over to the bylaws. So we're actually in the process through the interim board of reviewing what the draft bylaws are going to look like. So those sections haven't been 100% finalized, but we expect that would be the destination, and Brent McEwen may have a comment on that.
Yeah, I think that the main components of filling vacancies will still remain in the plan, but any other additional details around that will go into the bylaws.
Great. So I have someone with a raised hand. Rick Talue, do you have a question? If so, I can unmute you. Your hand's been raised for quite some time, so I can. Oh, he lowered it. So I have Kevin Bender and he has a question verbally. Kevin, I can allow you to talk. Kevin, you're just on mute currently.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yep.
I actually have a couple questions. One, you mentioned it early on, 350,000 in savings to this point, I'm guessing with the management combination of the organizations. Is there an estimate on how much more savings will come with a single entity now? And my second question, just kind of comes out of the end here, talking about directors. Is there any stipulation on like being eligible if you grow wheat or barley or both in certain regions? Just wondering on director eligibility.
So Kevin, I think for your first question, we'll get Saida to answer that in reference to the additional cost savings.
Okay. Thanks, Megan, and thanks, Kevin, for the question. So yes, there will be savings in the costs associated with having two boards, two sets of board meetings and AGMs, as well as two annual audits. In some cases, we will be moving from two memberships in external organizations down to one. And again, this is part of the process and ongoing exploration is finding areas to have more cost savings as we move into this new entity, into the amalgamation. So in a nutshell, yes, there will be more savings associated as we move forward with this plan.
And I think,
Sorry, I just want to add that for Kevin and everybody. One of the other advantages above and beyond the fiscal side of things is the streamlining of the management and governance structures. I think we've probably all remember seeing some 1980s sitcom where some poor guy is trying to date two girls on the same night. And then sometimes I feel like that's what our teams are working with right now. So it's definitely going to streamline things and make it an easier organization to manage.
Greg, it sounds like you had a lively dating life that you refer to. But for the second part of Kevin's question, which is referring to the eligible producers for the director position, do they need to grow wheat or barley? I think we'll pivot that over to Tara.
Thanks. I think, Greg, you just got the quote of the day, so that was a good one. To answer your question, Kevin, in order to sit on the board or serve as a delegate, you will have to grow and pay a levy for either wheat or barley. It's not going to be a requirement for you to grow both, but you will have to have grown at least one of them and paid your levy to that. Same with, and that applies to both the directors and delegates. So similar to what we do now, but it won't be a requirement for both. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thanks, Kevin, for the questions. I'm going to move over to the Q&A button. So we have Terry James asking here, have four-year terms been considered for directors? Greg, maybe I'll get you to answer this one.
Okay, thanks for your question, Terry. We've had a lot of discussions about that, and Marketing Council has actually clarified that under current regulations, we are not capable of having four-year terms. We could have one more, possibly three-year term. I believe Canola is looking at going to that, but under regulation right now, the limit is a three-year term for directors.
Awesome. So I do have one raised hand, which is Dave Bartlett. Dave, I'm going to allow you to talk and ask your question here.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are.
I'm just curious how the regions have been realigned.
I think we can maybe get Tara to speak to that.
Yeah, David, we have not finalized that, as we mentioned in the presentation. We are following the 6-region format of barley, but we haven't yet fully decided. There's been some discussion of possibly moving the lines a little bit, but it hasn't been determined as yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. All right, moving back to the Q&A button here, there's a question from Ken Erickson. Will there be any barley and wheat specific staff roles in the organization, or will they be combined as well? i.e., for example, research or market development. Maybe I'll get Tom or Saida to chime in on that one because it's a little bit more on the operations side.
I'll address that. Thanks, Kent, for the question. Really, since we went to a single management team in 2017, leading into early 2018, we've erased the lines of the staff, like the research team, for example, focuses on both commodities. We did, in the early days, have one of our research staff members that was more focused on the barley research files and another on the wheat side. But as time has gone on, we've really merged all of those functions into one. So on market development, for example, we have Shannon Sarita, who's leading those files, and she is dealing both with Cereals Canada and CMBTC as an example. So really, there's no distinction on wheat specific or barley specific in the new commission, and there hasn't been a tremendous amount of that even in the lead up to this.
And if I can add, Tom, one of the first things that the new governance structure and team is going to have to look at is the strategic plan, and scoping out that strategic plan so that it does provide coverage to all the crops that the new commission will work with, ensuring balance through that mechanism rather than entrenching anything right from the start.
Awesome. I am going to ask a question, another one from the Q&A button, just because that one filled up the quick list. So this one's from John Mako. Are there any directors at large in the new board structure? I guess maybe we'll have Greg answer that one. I know you just spoke, Greg, but.
The answer is no. I think it was decided that the 12 regions, or sorry, 6 regions with 2 directors from each, plus the delegate structure should provide sufficient coverage for anything that those directors at large positions might cover off.
Great. I do have one person that has their hand up, Micah Peterson. So Micah, I'm just going to allow you to ask your questions verbally.
Am I unmuted there now?
Yes, you are.
Perfect. So I guess I got kind of 2 questions that are kind of one and the same. The first is going to be just like, is there still going to be 2 separate checkoffs for wheat and barley? And I guess the second one, kind of pertaining to the first, will this amalgamation change the checkoff per ton levy that's going to be collected, or is that going to stay the same?
So I think for the first question on will there continue to be 2 separate checkoffs, maybe I'll get Tom to address that.
Sure. Yeah, Micah, we're going to continue with 2 separate checkoffs. They're 2 distinct grains in the handling system, and it would be very difficult to create an environment where we had a combined checkoff. I think from a programming standpoint, those systems have been in place with the grain dealers for many years. And it would add a lot of complication to the system to attempt to do that. Saida may want to comment on that side of it, as well as answering the second part of that question.
Sure, thanks, Mika, for the question. So the checkoff rates for both organizations will continue to be separate, and we'll maintain that as $1.09 for wheat and $1.20 per ton for barley. So there will be no implications on the collection of the per tonnage rate from producers. I hope that answers your question.
And cited just in terms of if we were, for example, to go to the grain companies and say we wanted a combined checkoff for wheat and barley, what would be the implications of that from a programming standpoint?
I think it will actually be incurring more additional costs for both for the dealers as well as us as well. Just because we maintain and the separation of two levies and using the reinvestment model based on the collection and allocation of those levies by commodities. We'll be having two separate bank accounts for managing those levies as well as collection from the dealers. It will add more administrative burden on dealers to implement that change on their end.
Great. Pretty robust answer there. So there's another question from the Q&A button here from Jeff Nielsen. What is going to happen to farm cash? Will it be spun out as a separate entity? Again, this is operations. So maybe Tom or Saida could speak to that.
Well, I can speak to it just to the extent that it's certainly on the agenda for the interim board to consider what the legal structure is of the new commission. And the Alberta Wheat Commission is the sole sponsor of farm cash at the moment. But we will certainly be having a conversation about how it fits into the new organization. And that'll be a conversation with the interim board. And Saida, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think, Tom, you covered it all. That's definitely going to be a bigger discussion as we move forward with this, this process for farm cash for sure.
So one more question, another question here from John Mako. What is the structure of the interim delegate body? Tara, maybe you want to tackle this one.
Sure. As it stands, of course, when our two commissions would cease to be effective July 31st, so just like the board, that means that the present delegates would no longer exist, so to speak. So as an interim board, we've had that discussion, and what we're going to be doing is in the fall is when we'll run elections for new delegates, and that's when we'll have, so the discussion hasn't fully been finalized, but I don't believe we're going to have for those short few months delegates. That's an ongoing discussion, how that would look if we were to, but at this point, I don't think we're going to be doing that. So come the fall, regular nomination process, elections for delegates, and our thought process, and this does tie into the director at large question is, I mean, a 14-member board, in our opinion, is just too large. 12 is big enough. And with 6 regions, that's how we came with 2 directors to get that type of representation. And our thoughts are we want to use the delegates even more than we are now so that they can fill potential areas even more so than we're doing now. So hopefully that answered that question for you.
Thanks, Tara. I have a question here from Marvin Newman. The regulations mention service charges. I've heard levy and check off, not service charge. Should service charge be a defined term in the regulations? Maybe I'll get Brent McEwen from Marketing Council to speak to that one.
It's a good question. Everybody uses different nomenclature. You use check off and levy and service charge. I think the proper name is service charge, and that can certainly be highlighted in the definition section if needed.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, we're guilty of flipping back and forth on check off, levy. We don't usually use service charge in our communications. We tend to alternate between levy and check off, but I guess it's our vernacular more than anything.
And I can assure you that every board and commission out there, all 20 use a different, but according to MAPA, it is a service charge.
Okay, so maybe that's some feedback for us that we need to maybe update our definitions portion for section 1 and include service charge, and also maybe put our nomenclature of levy and checkoff in there as well. So this is what this session's all about. So that's really great to hear. The final question that I have in the Q&A box is, I think, more of a statement than a question, but I will read it nonetheless, which is, no doubt the success of PCS and BAMP shows that it needs to continue and the new entity's AGM to be held at the same time. We know the hotel can handle bigger crowds, so look forward to keeping PCS going. Maybe as a question that I might propose to spin off from that, have you, Tara and Greg, maybe you can speak to whether or not there's been anything defined as far as when the new entity's AGM, where and when it will be held.
Okay. So I guess we have not followed through on that discussion just yet. We do recognize that the two AGMs are in different places and different times. We are in the enviable position of having two really great producer-facing events that are a great option to hold an AGM at. And you know, I think other people wish they had that situation where they knew they had an event that they could get 100 people in their AGMs for. But at this point, we haven't finalized that. I don't know if Tara and I are going to arm wrestle or not.
Wow, I'm grinning because I think from the grin, perhaps some of you might know which location I'm partial to, but so I'm one of many voices, and I agree with Greg with both. Obviously, Banff is a place that Barley has enjoyed time for our AGM and our conference. So it hasn't been discussed. It has not been decided as correct because those are two very good locations. But thank you for saying you'd like it there.
And I think Jeff needs to run for a senator position or something like that. That's a good question, period question.
Okay, I do have one more question that just got submitted by Trevor Peterson. Why only 4 delegates per region when the total number with the 2 separate commissions was much higher? So maybe Greg or Tara could maybe tackle this one from your perspective on why the interim board selected 4 delegates per region.
I think there's quite a few different reasons why we went that way. You know, the first and foremost is simple math. 4 delegates per region gives you the 24. I think we have a desire to have a more engaged delegate body than perhaps we've seen in the past. You know, we can have 100 delegates, but if we're still only getting 30 of them coming to committee meetings and actively participating in the governance of the organization, it doesn't really make that much difference. So we picked 24. Again, it's kind of a wheat commission basis of having that many, and that's what we're going to go with for now, I think. I don't know if Tara has anything else to comment.
Well, and I think that also speaks to when we talk about streamlining and cost saving, that was also part of that discussion. So that was also part of it. You know, some regions have difficulty filling positions where and we would like to make that easier, and the rest of it Greg has touched on. We definitely, I'm very happy to say, are having some serious conversations on how we want to engage our delegates so that they're more involved, more leadership opportunities or growth opportunities for them. And 4 is where we came to at this point. And you know, this is us building a new straw dog. So we're starting with that. Should that change further down the line, that's something the new commission and new board can certainly look at, but this made sense to us to start here.
Thank you, Tara and Greg. I do have Marvin Newman who has raised his hand. So Marvin, I'm gonna allow you to talk, to ask your question.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. So a couple questions. So it doesn't say in the regulation, I don't believe it says in the regulation about what kind of structure the commission is. You know, I'm pretty sure it's a not-for-profit corporation, but I don't think it says that. And then also just it has quite a bit of detail, like going over election of directors and service charges and refunds and things like that, but doesn't seem to have much on things like who approves the budget, if there's annual budgets, 5-year budgets, what happens in the case of a surplus or a deficit budget, things like that. So is that, I may assume that's covered in the bylaws? Not sure.
Brent, maybe you can speak to the first question.
Yeah, sorry, you caught me with a bunch of questions there. Can you go back to the first one?
I think what he was asking is the regulation doesn't refer to the legal status of
Oh, the legal
organization.
status, the legal status is captured in MAPA. You're all not-for-profit crown corporations under the Marketing of Agricultural Products Act. Now, as far as specifics, it depends how much, I guess, you want to put in bylaws, and how much detail you want to put in is because if you modify the detail, then you got to go back and go through the whole process of changing bylaws. So a lot of that, some of that stuff I would submit, the devil's in the detail could be put in policy, and those policies should be approved by the membership and the producers. So again, when you're talking MAP, you know, when you're talking the whole regulatory structure, MAP is the high level architecture for all the boards and commissions. You know, your plan regulations are really the high level, how your organization is going to run, what requirements and sections you have under or regulatory abilities you have under your bylaws, and then your plan regulation, and then your little more detail goes into your bylaws. No different than your church bylaws. They're quite similar, or sports bylaws, and then from there you can put and make yourself a little more nimble by putting things into policy. So some of those things, Marvin, I would suggest could be put in policy or could be put in the bylaws, depending on where you want to put them. And then with Marketing Council's requirements, we always suggest and kind of require that everybody is consulted before any changes are made to those things. So as Tom and company puts together bylaws, we would require that those bylaws be put in front of membership as well, for discussion and approval before Marketing Council takes them on. Hopefully that answers your question.
And we also have policies, Marvin, that govern things like you know, expenses, signing authorities, what the philosophy is on a certain threshold of approvals that is required by the board. For example, anything in the Alberta Wheat Commission, anything over $10,000 expense needs to be signed off on by the executive. And so things like that are embedded in our policies.
Okay, well, I don't see any more questions in the Q&A or with raised hand. So I'm gonna turn it back to Greg, if that's okay.
Okay. Now I got to find my page, which is easier said than done.
Well, while you're finding your page, I just want to thank everyone for all the questions that they asked today, because it was a really good discussion and it's great to see everyone engaged.
Okay, I'm back on track here. So, that being all the questions, last call for questions, I guess. I'd like to personally thank you all for attending today's town hall. It's been great to have the participation of the producer body. And, you're really exemplifying how this is a democratically run organization, and encourage you to keep engaged. Hope you all have a great start to your seeding season, and safe and moisture when we need it. We will be issuing a follow-up survey in the coming days to get some of your feedback about what you heard here this morning. The survey will be available for feedback about the proposed plan regulation until March 31st at 11:59 p.m. Also, this session has been recorded, as you may have noticed, and will be posted to the Commission's YouTube channel for playback access and viewing. And we encourage you to send in comments that may come up at that time. We're still looking for more feedback. If you do think of any questions, feel free to reach out to Tom, Tara, Syed, or myself to answer them. And with that, I would like to thank you for attending, and we will catch up with you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.